Was there still... There was still Pepsi in that, wasn't there?
No, I know what I'm doing.
Okay, Ben's... I don't know what he's doing.
Don't worry.
He's got a lot of cups going on. Sorry, you can't see...
I know, I can't see.
You can't see us, yeah. Sorry.
I trust you.
In 3, 2... Hey guys, welcome back to the Arthritis Podcast, official podcast of digital and creative media works, where each week we take something from pop culture and try to break it down to better understand it. My name is David.
Hello, my name is Ben.
And Ben, this week we are joined again by returning guest, Danielle.
Hello there. Thanks for having me.
Danielle comes to us from Level Story magazine. Issue number 3 just dropped, Danielle. Very exciting. I've read through it. Congrats on issue 3.
Thank you. It means a lot.
Do you want to tell the folks a little bit about issue 3 and the magazine, just before we kick off?
Yeah, so Level Story is a magazine about critiquing and celebrating story and video game. And this most recent issue was about Kingdom Hearts 1. For those of you who don't know, that's the Square Enix and Disney title. They combined them together. And it's one of my favorite games. And basically the issue just goes into what turns out to be a lot of the flaws of the game. I didn't intend for that, but it's also celebrating it. So I think it's fun. You have a good time reading it.
When I was reading, I've read through it, I think 2.5 times now.
Oh, wow.
Because a lot of, I don't know anything about Kingdom Hearts, to be completely honest with you. So it's all very fresh and new to me. And it didn't strike me so much as flaws, just as things that, as the game ages, become more and more evident, I think. Which is something that I think we'll talk about a bit today as well. Where just things that stick out to you as odd or esoteric in hindsight. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, so go check that out. What's the best URL for that? It's levelstory.net, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Excellent. So go check that out. And then, of course, at the end, we'll revisit and tell people where they can find you on the internet. Cool. But this week, we brought you back in because we're talking about another video game that has a lot of story in it.
And a lot of walking.
A lot of walking. Last time... All right, pal. Last time we talked about Firewatch, a game that is a radio communication simulation video game. Firewatch
tries to be, but
simulation video game. This week we are talking about the OG, the original, because this week we are talking about the meaning of Dear Esther.
Oh my lord!
I can't believe it's taken us 4.5 years to do this.
Can I just ask, how many times have you both played this game?
I'm at 10 or 12.
I played it once when it came out in the good old year of 2012.
Yeah, well, that was
okay when it came out.
That was when we'll get to that. It came out originally in 2009, but let's not go
right. Yeah, it's when the retail version came out.
But how many times did you say?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah,
a few.
And Danielle, this was your first time, right, for this recording?
Yeah, I played once, and then I played again last night just to try to get some kind of sense of what was going on.
What the hell's going on?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, I played this a lot, so hopefully I can kind of help maybe navigate you guys through this weird figure of
There's
nonsense.
Layers of reference.
Yeah, so for those of you not playing along at home, Dear Esther is a 2009 exploration narrative-driven game following the story of a man on an abandoned island, written by Paul Pinchbeck and Dan Pinchbeck, and published by the Chinese Room. It came out in 2009, then again in 2012 as kind of a redux version in a different engine.
And then again
it's come out again
2015.
In 2015 in a different engine again. So it's been kind of remade a handful of times. Ostensibly, the things that remain the same are the navigational elements, the script itself, the narration, and the kind of island itself. It's just all kind of been remastered and remeshed. So before we get into the summary, let's do a quick roundtable. What did you guys think? So let's start with you, Danielle. You have the freshest eyes on this. What did you think going into it?
You know, I'll tell you, I still am having a hard time figuring out what's going on, but I love it a lot.
Excellent. Love it a lot is a glowing recommendation. Ben, what about you?
The first time I played this was when the retail version came out, and it's funny. There's a screenshot I put up on Facebook of like part of my playthrough when I played it all the way back in fresh year of 2012.
Adam, can we see that on screen?
No, he's not getting access to my... Oh shit, he does have my Facebook. Anyway,
thanks, Adam.
There's a comment thread in there of me aggressively defending this game against someone who I assumed has either blocked me or deleted their account because their comments are not there. It's just my comments being very aggressive.
Yeah.
So fun fact from that comment thread, the original release of Dear Esther was profitable within 6 hours of it coming out.
It's because it costs next to nothing.
Probably because it costs next to nothing.
Yeah.
But it was pretty successful as a game when it came out.
Mate,
in
it
2012.
sold 950 million units today.
Pretty successful.
It's pretty successful.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's lost a bit of the mystique.
Okay.
After like Firewatch especially, it's like going back to Dear Esther is pretty hard.
You know what it is, I think?
It's just not a lot in it.
No, I don't want to preempt it too much, but it's a bit like when you're like 14 and you discover Lovecraft and and you're like enchanted by it and you think it's the best thing ever.
You think it's like super deep.
Dear Esther's a bit like that where you come back to it as an adult and you go, yeah, I see the merit in this, but it's not the glowing philosophical well I thought it was, just because I can say insanguinate doesn't make it smart.
Yeah, I still think it's good. I would like compare it to Annihilation, where it's like it's good as like a analysis piece. Like you can dive into it and there's a lot of really cool stuff you can find, and a lot of cool like references, and you can kind of like build these connections, and it's like it's fun to like dig through and like figure it out. And once you like realize some of the like references that it's making, you're like, oh my god, that's crazy.
And it's especially given the esoteric nature of the way the scripting works.
Yeah.
Depending on when you play it and how many times you played it, you will have a completely different opinion as to the narrative as other people. It's fascinating.
It's a lot of fun to put together.
That being said, let me try with the summary.
Sure.
And we'll get to why this may not be an accurate summary, because it is kind of complicated.
Yeah.
My kind of take on it was sort of a similar thing. I was less enchanted by it, but I just think that's an age thing. I just think I've played smarter stuff. I played things that are more philosophical. Like, I appreciate Batman Begins now. Like, I've gone through some growth as someone that can read text, and I appreciate what it's trying to do. I just think in some places it misses because of that random element. We'll get to that later. So, time for the summary. Do you know how to say Hebridean? I think it's Hebridean. No one does. On a Hebridean island, you walk from one end to the other, listening to a narrator read fragments of letters to his deceased wife, Esther. The letters are often slightly contradictory, and as you discover derelict buildings and long-abandoned homes, you learn of several other characters. Donnelly, who originally chartered the island, Paul, who may have been the drunk driver who caused Esther's accident and death, and a shepherd named Jakobsen, who lived on the island in the 18th century. Through the game, the world morphs and shifts into pseudo-diegetic images and sounds from the narrator's letters, and all the while a figure watches from the distance, never revealed to us. The game does not so much end as it stops, and the player is left to draw their own conclusions about Esther and the island, and whether any of this had any meaning whatsoever. Ultimately, we become a bird and soar across the island, leaving it forever. Credits.
I like to point out, Danielle, you had like a face when David mentioned the figure watching.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you not know? Were you like, what is David talking about?
For some clarity, Ben can see you. I can't.
I can see the webcam.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you not know about the figure?
The figure?
No, I know about it. I saw it like I guess it was kind of toward the end of the game, almost toward the end. And I thought, oh, we're going to meet somebody. And then it wasn't there. But then yesterday when I replayed, I was walking kind of down this hill and I saw like a cave and I saw it again. And I was like, it was kind of really quick and then it disappeared. And I'm like, whoa. Like,
so,
yes. Oh, that's so exciting to hear you say that. Okay.
Yeah.
Ben's grinning like an idiot. Go ahead.
So there's probably the coolest mechanic in this game, and I played the remaster. It's like the Landmark edition.
The Landmark edition.
So there was the original one, then in the first retail release, which is still on the Source engine. So the game's full of these figures. Like there's like 8 of them.
Oh.
And
there's 4 that are, there's 3 and they appear in different cycles.
Right.
Like the actual textures, but there's effectively 8.
In the original retail release, the way they work is that they would just be like sitting in sort of like silhouetted positions.
Set places, yeah.
And if you look at them, they disappear.
Yeah.
So it's this thing where you'll always see them in like the side
periphery.
of your view, your peripheral, and you'll be like, oh, what is that? And you'll look across and they'll just disappear before you get a look at it. And it is so trippy and
so spooky.
Oh, it's very spooky. To the point where the screenshot I took that I talked about earlier.
Adam, put it up again.
When I took the screenshot, I didn't realize that I actually had gotten a photo of one of the figures.
Oh,
I only realized it like a day after. God. I was like, wait, what is that? And I saw it and I was like, oh dear God.
Okay, this is just before we move on to like then what it's like in the new release. That shit is like the episode of Doctor Who Midnight where you know that the don't know if you guys remember this. I might be talking to just myself here. Hey Pat, do you watch much Doctor Who? Okay, just me then. So in Adam, put the video up. So like in Midnight, there's a shot where they open up the shutters of this, like super armored spacecraft against like UV exotonic rays or whatever, and it's like this beautiful crystalline landscape. It's all lens flare and stuff, and there's like a shadow that a character describes moving across the screen. Yeah. They didn't do any VFX. There's nothing moving. But you can watch like 1,000 YouTube videos where they try and find this creature moving.
Right, yeah.
Similar kind of idea where you're like, did I really see that?
Well, in the new release, I'm pretty sure they've just tweaked it where you can actually look directly at it and it won't just disappear. Okay. But in the original one, it was you'd look at it and it would disappear. You could look away and it would slowly like fade back into existence. It was this really cool effect that would always just like trip you up whenever you saw them. Mm-hmm. But the new one, it's just like a figure that disappears when you get too close. All right. I mean, it still works.
But it was spookier because it was more grungy programming at the time where it was like
a bit ghetto. Yeah.
Bit ghetto. Okay, let's do the obligatory walking simulator bit because I want to get to the interesting stuff.
Yeah, I just wanted to gush about the fact that
it's amazing.
The figure is like the coolest part of the game.
We'll fold that in a bit later. Okay, so on the topic of to interact or not to interact,
David
throwing beer over it.
Spilled his beer.
The biggest dividing people's opinions of the game is the lack of gameplay. No, I'm just gonna just do this. Sorry, I don't normally leave stuff behind me because I'm looking that way. That was my fault. It's fine. I don't hit anything important. The lights are fine.
It's all right.
The biggest dividing in people's opinions of the game is the lack of gameplay. There is arguably no gameplay mechanics. You just walk. Are we to believe then that the critics who dislike the game for this reason are in bad faith, or they just didn't get it? This is something I think that, there was an article in the previous level story, Danielle, that kind of speaks to this as a topic and the idea of walking simulators as a whole. Did you kind of have a view on this?
I would say that there are gameplay mechanics. I mean, they're just not as defined as maybe something like typical games, I guess. Like, I mean, the fact that, the only mechanic really is walking and zooming in. But I think that that's intentional. The fact that you're walking, you cannot run, you have to walk, and you sort of have to pay attention to that. Now, I know some people don't like that, and that article actually is written by Sam Gronseth, who is Games as Literature on YouTube.
Check him out.
Yeah, so I would say there are mechanics. It's just not as much as you typically find. I know a lot of people don't like that, but they're there. It's just not over. I don't know.
I guess I suppose most games sell themselves on like, this is our unique mechanic kind of like, there's a gameplay. I don't want to sound cynical, but like it's a gameplay like gimmick or whatever, where it's like it's like a Call of Duty but with bleh. It's Dark Souls but with bleh. Like there's some selling hook. This game's selling point is, do you enjoy Quiet Oblivion? You're welcome. Like it's sort of a different. It's a different breed altogether. And for me, the selling point, and I guess my argument against that kind of like there's no gameplay mechanic or whatever, because ostensibly the argument there is just make a movie. The difference with this...
Yeah, no.
You both made the same noise. The difference with this, I think... Well, did you want to speak to that? Because I don't want to put words in you guys' mouths, but you literally both made the same like sigh where you were like, I just don't think so. Like, tell me about that.
I don't think this could be a movie. Like, So a lot of people will say like, oh, there's no choice. Like, games gotta have choice. But I think there is choice in this game. Mm-hmm. It's not a roller coaster. If anything, it's a roller coaster where you have a lever and you gotta fucking yank the roller coaster onto different rails. Like that's
gently guided.
That's a better analogy because you can go off the beaten path. There are sort of like, different ways to go, and most of them will
optional areas. I'm doing air quotes, but
they'll lead to dead ends or they'll wrap you around.
But you still learn something.
Yeah, and it's just, it's more content. It's it's more akin to like walking around like an art gallery, and people wouldn't consider, if you compare like an art gallery versus just like looking at the picture online.
You go to an art gallery.
Yeah, you go to an art gallery and you walk around and you pretend to understand the artwork. And it's like, that's part of the experience.
But I mean, the narrator even analogizes the island to being like a broken museum. It's interesting you use that turn of phrase.
And I think even like, the things like the figures and like the literal the writing on the wall, like it adds more to it where it's not just like, oh, you just walk through an experience. Like you can actually... There's points of the game where you're just like, there's like writing on this wall and I can't really get a good view of it. I'm going to go stand in this particular spot that gives me a good view, and so I can read it, and it's usually some
real
biblical reference, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's that, like, there is problem solving in this game where it's, you know, it's fairly kind of like, you know, you could blast.
It's 1-to-1. It's not like a Tomb Raider where you have to like work out this complex. There is quote unquote puzzle solving, but it's very literal, like zero abstraction,
and it's play driven as well. Like you can you know, speed run Dear Esther in probably like 20 minutes, but it's like, yeah, you could, but
you need 2 hours to appreciate it.
Yeah, hour and a half.
I took my time. I like the music.
Multiple playthroughs. Let's go with that.
One of the things that makes it interesting is that unique randomness of the way that you get delivered the scripted dialogue. For those of you who sort of not in there or haven't played it, every playthrough, there are certain set moments in the game where you get delivered particular pieces of narration. The rest of it is semi-randomized. There's like 10 or 12 different iterations of every dialogue piece. So depending on what you get, depends on your actual interpretation, to the point where like some readings, the guy who kills your wife isn't Paul, the guy I mentioned earlier.
Wow.
We'll get to that. Yeah, it's really complicated. So let's just talk about what the game is about, and then hopefully I can kind of fill in some blanks for Danielle, for you, for sort of what the fuck is going on with this game. The game is centrally about the romantic sense of an apocalypse. So the end of the, you know, when you talk about like apocalypse kind of stories and ideas, you're thinking like your Michael Bay's, where it's like everything is ruined and you have to like survive, or it's like your Fallouts, where you have to gun down all the mutants, or The Last of Us, where you have to brick a zombie in the face to survive. This is like a different kind of apocalypse. It's like the apocalypse of humanity, I guess, where the end of the world, as dreamt by someone who's lost their world in a single accident. And it's this weird version of that where it's like told through a metaphor of an island and a man named Connolly, and then this weird shadowy observer. And I think that Waypoint's Cameron Kunzelman summarizes the game perfectly, so I'm going to read a quote from him. Waypoint is now Vice Games. I don't know what to call them anymore. Quote, Dear Esther tells the story of a man whose life has been shattered by the death of his partner in a car accident. Or it tells the story of a ghost tracing the path of a man across an island. Or it tells the story of a man named Paul who caused a car accident that killed a woman and who has been driven into a third-person narrative about his own life. Interpretations vary as to the plot, most of which has to do with the randomized voiceover and physical objects within the game. The pieces of the narrative and world building that you get are, within bounds, fairly random. End quote. So that kind of goes to what you were saying, Ben, where like depending on how you play it, depends on what you actually see and experience.
Yeah.
So you could take the interpretation of like, the basic interpretation is you're on this island, you kind of this drunk who doesn't really have much to live for, you've gone there to die basically, and you carve the lines into the cliff so that no one rescues you, you hurt your leg, you chug up on painkillers, you jump off a cliff and die. That's the basic idea.
You turn into a bird, David.
Sorry, you turn into a bird.
Yeah, come on
Excuse
now.
me. Excuse me, sorry.
It's not a metaphor. That bit's literal.
And that Paul is the drunk driver who killed your wife, who insists he wasn't drunk, he was just tired. I guess for me, like what the game is about is this idea that it's a world without humanity. Like I think other games, it's like that are very similar. Like there's something to preserve. Like you'd be fighting against some oncoming tide of like whether it's the zombies or like the whatever the thing is. There's some motivation to save humanity. This game is just empty, and it forces you to think about your world and the relationship to it. And Kunzelman posits the game is about going on despite everything. And I'm going to read you guys this quote, and I want to get your opinion on it. So it's from Kunzelman in the same article about Dear Esther, where he's talking about this as a kind of semiotic apocalypse. And he says, quote, it's about reconciling with a loss or a great tragedy and then somehow scraping through it with the recognition that somehow things never seem to truly be over. Dear Esther's protagonist drops into empty air, but the game ends on wings that fly us to another place. That transformation from human to bird, that's the work. End quote. It's about enduring.
It's about turning into a bird. Wait.
It's about becoming a bird. Yeah. It's animorphs.
Oh, Animorphs?
Animorphs.
Oh.
I almost said animorphics. Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah. Sorry.
Remind us of Animorphs. Jeez.
But like, given the themes of the game, like it's some heavy shit, guys. Like this game is so drenched in its own kind of over symbolic, semiotic kind of idea of a, like, you know, when the person you love dies, whether it be if you have the reading of like Paul as you as the narrator at your own hand, whether it's the unfortunate accident of a drunk or tired driver, whether it's that you could have done more, like there's something kind of fatalistic to it.
Yeah, and the randomness is interesting because like when I played this game for the first time, and like my big takeaway is always just the Damascus reference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I try to play this game and not think about it, but it literally just screams at you.
Also, it's in big white writing on the wall at the end.
So like it's hard to avoid the Paul Saul Damascus story, biblical story.
Oh shit, Paul Saul, that just clicked for me.
Seriously?
Oh god.
Yeah.
Oh,
hi
God.
David, welcome to
welcome
the biblical reading of this game.
Oh.
Yeah, that's like the biggest one. David's just having a moment because it's been 7 years.
I spent 7 years. I spent 20 hours researching for this fucking
you didn't
episode.
pick up on the.
Oh my
on
god!
Paul Saul.
Well, they have different letters at the start, don't they?
Well, so Paul
and Saul
becomes Saul, or Saul becomes Paul.
Yeah, Saul becomes Paul.
And there's the whole blinding and rah,
fuck
rah,
me.
rah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's probably like
It's been
one
a
of
minute
the.
since I read the Bible, gang. I apologize.
So that's probably like one of the biggest references in this, and it's interesting that like most of the readings you get can still kind of neatly fit into, that box of like, the biblical story, which is, that's kind of just like good writing. It's not like the most subtle of readings.
Well, you'll be interested to know my reading doesn't contain that because I've just learned that.
Oh.
And it's interesting that the writing of all the Damascus stuff and the, all of the quotes from the Bible is also the same sort of like bioluminescence paint that is used to just draw a bunch of like electrical circuits and also organic chemistry diagrams.
It's like his neurons in his body or whatever.
Yeah, but there's like actual technical electrical wiring drawings.
Someone sat down and worked out. I'm sure that someone's worked out.
Oh, most of it's just like transformers.
That would be cool.
Okay.
So like electrical transformers.
Yeah,
like when I was 2012 when I played this game for the first time, I was like such a nerd, and I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out.
A lot of free time.
I got a little bit. I'm pretty sure there's like most of the organic chemistry diagrams are just ethanol.
Well, because he's a fucking alcoholic. Yeah.
Haven't figured out the electrical diagrams because it could be anything.
I don't know. It could be
the nature of electricity. Then there are diagrams where it's like an organic chemistry diagram, except everything is like electrical diagram icons. It's this weird where it's like that actually doesn't make any sense. And it's like it's this weird like it's almost like they're like melding together, which again kind of comes to this like transitionary idea,
the reality and the fictive and the okay. So the random nature of the playthroughs means there's no canonical Dear Esther story,
right?
Which I think that's kind of what grief is like too. I think, but I think there's a deliberateness to that metafictiveness where, because the tones and ideas and everything is so muddled, and like the fact that like some of the diagrams are real and some of them aren't, and some of the equations are real and some of them aren't. I think it provides this brilliant contrast for the player where they have no quote unquote choice in what happens. Like effectively, like the game ends the same way every time.
Yeah.
But the grief is experienced differently each time. And I think the gap between your ability to control the grief and the randomness of the grief is the point of the game in some ways. There's a kind of texture to that because grief is esoteric and does not follow a set of rules. It's like the game is trying to, in a meta sense, like simulate that emotion where each time you revisit if you've lost someone, every time you reimagine, the last time we spoke or that accident, it is always different. And maybe it was Paul this time, maybe it was me this time. There's kind of a dreamlike quality to it, and in a weird way, in a kind of meta way, it does illustrate and render that in the strangest, like most accurate way possible. Like when I play this, I think of like someone that I've lost personally who passed away, and it's just like there's something about it that registers where it just is so. There's something non-real about it. That's kind of what grief is, I think.
Yeah.
All you can do is come to terms with it, to me.
Yeah, and I think that like the middle part of this game is probably like the funkiest.
Mm-hmm.
That's where like most people are just like, what is this game doing?
The middle part being
the cave.
The cave.
You spend a lot of time just like jumping in and out of water.
Mm-hmm.
There's the pit just before the cave where the game offers you a pit to fall into. I absolutely took that option.
Do you think
the game just
is there an option not to?
You don't have to.
Okay, I didn't know.
You can walk around it. Most people just fucking tally ho.
Well, there's a
pit.
gameplay mechanic if there ever was one.
So that is like a choice, but you jump in, the game just resets you. You can just walk around that pit.
Oh, okay.
Wait, really?
Yeah, most people don't.
Danielle and I like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
no,
we thought that was
most people
you had
jump
to.
right in. There's some like legitimate like platforming sections in this game.
Yeah.
there's some areas where you can access, which is like it's really finicky to get to, and because you can't jump and you can't sprint, and
you have
you
to
can
just
only
be
walk.
good.
Not good. It's just like
it's a challenge.
Yeah, like at the very start where there's that where you go up the cliff or you can go down onto the beach, and you go up the cliff and then you eventually just kind of fall down to the beach. You can kind of get past that first one, and there's like a little cave on the side.
Yeah.
They give you that challenge again the second time. It's impossible to do that one. You just fall straight down.
Did either of you die at all?
Can't. No, I didn't.
Apart from jumping into the pit, no.
I don't know.
You can die.
Can you?
I mean, you'll just come back to life. But
Wait, did you?
I did it on purpose. When I first started playing the game, when you start out on that dock,
Oh my god.
I walked into the water just to see what would happen.
Oh, hey, Adam, put a clip up of that. Shit. Okay. Wow. All right.
Hey,
this is all
Adam,
news to me.
download Dear Esther and play it.
Yeah.
And walk into the water.
He's got a job to do. No, don't talk to him like that.
Well,
I think when you kind of realized that and you went into the rest of the game, like, did that change? Not change your opinion, but like, how do you think that kind of shaped what you were looking at?
Well, it didn't really change it. It just made it feel more interactive and like I could experiment with things. But what's interesting too about when you die is that the narrator whispers, "Come back."
Yeah. Same thing happens when you jump in the pit. Yeah.
Oh, really?
And then he whispers, Esther, Esther, Esther at the end.
We're all just having different experiences.
I
here.
just, because oh God, I'm like, that might be on purpose.
Well, there's trophies, for dying.
There's achievements for jumping in the pit.
Look at that
so you know I
stuff.
jumped in the pit.
You know I jumped in the pit. I need that game at school. Okay, I guess let's dig into some of the imagery and metaphors and allegory and the meat and potatoes of this. Let's talk about new wave allegory that this game borrows from. To be clear, do you guys know much about Oscar Wilde?
Yeah, sure.
Ben nodded, he's lying. Danielle?
Somewhat. I've read Dorian Gray. That's about.
Okay, so you've read the good stuff. Yeah, okay. That's a good touch point. So like the kind of previous romantic era was like sort of he was like parodying that. So it's easy touch point for most people. So the idea was that like romanticism was heightened reality, like your beautiful maidens, your dashing handsome princes, but in real life, like your Victorian era fancy people, everything's beautiful. The kind of after that, the new wave of that was like everything was allegorical. So everything was like a version of that, right? And it all meant something else. So like the fancy suit was a metaphor for his self-esteem, and like the dress was a metaphor for like her whatever. Like it was all sort of allegorical and semiotic. And Pinchbeck, who wrote the game, cites the work of William S. Burroughs as an inspiration for the game and the script. In particular, the non-linear narrative, the indirect metaphor building, where he spends the whole game, is like the hermit metaphor and a bunch of other stuff. But particularly the confessional aspects of the script. So if you get the Paul version, where Paul is the narrator speaking in third person, this whole game is like a confession of killing his wife, or killing a woman. And there's kind of three key images that are built throughout the game. So I want to touch on each of the three and get you guys' perspective on them. So I'm gonna tell you what the metaphor is, read you a quote, and then kind of get you guys to react to it. So the island as a metaphor for isolation, which is super obvious, versus the metaphor for his body, but we'll get to that. So quote, "Dear Esther, I found myself to be as featureless as this ocean, as shallow and unoccupied as this bay. A listless wreck without identification. My rocks are these bones and a careful fence to keep the precipice at bay. Shot through my caves, my forehead and mount, this area will transmit into me so. All over expose the nervous system where Donnelly's boots and yours and mine still trample. I will carry a torch for you. I will leave it at the foot of my headstone. You will need it for the tunnels that carry me under." End quote. And what that's alluding to is the island is kind of the thing that he's buried in. It's kind of his mausoleum. And we see that through the chemical paintings on the walls, the fact that he alludes to this idea that the island sprung up the moment she died, the car underwater, all that sort of thing. Like it's kind of this mausoleum of his life, the letters spread out on the beach as these boats going out to shore. When you guys go through the game and you think about this idea of like the island as this metaphor for his kind of singular isolation and the grief, does that work for you? Because that's one of the biggest things people talk about is like, that's the meaning of the game. That's like the island is him. It's his grief. It's his guts and bowels are in the caves. The abandoned homes are the kind of abandoned granaries and the brickeries of his life, where he's kind of, since his wife died, he's, stopped taking care of himself. He doesn't have any friends anymore. He's drinking all the time. He's an alcoholic. Like, does that work for you?
Gosh, I have no idea. For me, the island is weird because you get this sense that you're you're taking a path that has been traveled before, and especially traveled like a lot before, and is the kind of path that is possible to walk through. Like the island's very convenient in the way that it's laid out. It's all for how like exploratory the game is. It's very much, there's paths, there's rickety fences, even the caves just kind of like give you bridges over rivers. Like there's, you jump into a waterfall here and there, like, yeah, sure, who doesn't? It's all fairly like, the paths just being laid out for our main character. There's sort of like some like running theories sort of talk about how this path that our main character is walking is like a regular pilgrimage he takes like every day, and only once you actually step into the player does he actually like complete it and go up to the beacon. If you sort of map out like the route he goes, he does kind of, he makes it to like one end.
It loops around.
Yeah, and it does kind of loop around a bit. Like it's, he doesn't really go that far.
But even the Raider one is about that delusion, because he says, quote, "I find myself easily slipping into the delusional state of ascribing purpose, deliberate motive to everything here. Was this island formed during the moment of impact, when we were torn loose from our moorings and the seatbelts cut motorway lanes into our chests and shoulders? Did it first break? Surface then?" Quote. I think like he's wondering too. He's like, it seems too convenient. Like even the fact that the boy or the house that he lives in is at like the apex of one side and the tower is at the apex of the other.
Yeah.
Like it's this constant questioning of reality. Yeah, it's like, is this a path he travels every day? Is that why it's so convenient? Or is it just that this isn't real? And this is the first time it's ever happened? Is it a metaphor for something else? Like, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I just think it's fascinating.
It's probably a metaphor.
I mean,
it's probably a metaphor.
I mean, it probably is a metaphor. I don't know if I like the metaphor. I mean, it's fine, but it seems like a more, funnily enough, like more of a literal reading than any of the other takes I imagine there would be, just because you are walking this island. It does make it seem like it belongs to him, like it could, like I feel like that's the first one that I would jump to, and then I'd be like, I don't know.
Well, I guess then we can skip to the next one, because for me that's like the top, that's like what most people read it as. So the other one is like the ghostly figures, as being kind of this asymmetrical representation of grief and loss, and like in a way Esther, the dead wife, because they're always in the periphery by necessity in the original game. They're kind of like loss in some ways, where like they're the representation of the person you've lost. They're always unattainable, forever beyond your reach, but also never reconcilable. Like it doesn't matter how many times you look at that thing and then look away, it's always going to be there as you look back. So in some ways, and I've lost the quote here because it's not in this saved document, but there was a particular games writer, and I'll put him in the description, who talked about that literal mechanic of looking, like when you're looking away, you can see them, and as you look back, they disappear. Like that's kind of how grief is. The minute you kind of reflect on things, that person appears, but when you're kind of living your life, they're not there. A quote from the game that I think speaks to this. Quote, "I have become convinced I'm not alone here, even though I'm equally sure it is simply a delusion brought on by circumstance. I do not, for instance, remember where I found the candles, or why I took it upon myself to light such a strange pathway. Perhaps it is only for those who are bound to follow." Quote. Which kind of goes to what Ben was talking about before, which is like there's a reading where you're just following this like ghostly trail of someone that's been on the island.
Yeah.
Or are the candles real at all? Like there's so many layers that this is why my issue with the game starts to appear, where there's so many different readings of it that it's almost indeliberate.
One of the possible figure locations is inside the first building. If you go inside and you look up the lighthouse, one of the figures can be at the top looking down.
Oh.
That is one of the possible. I checked when I played and it wasn't there. I was like, damn it, I wanted that one. But that, like, that's at the very start of the game.
Oh, that's
one
a
of
lot,
the figures
yeah.
is there. The idea of the figures is that they are there for the whole game. There's no like point where it's like, all right, now they start appearing.
It's just supposed to be always.
They're just present. Yeah.
What was your kind of take on them, Danielle, not having the kind of emotional baggage we have with this? Like, did you kind of have a reading on the figures?
I did. I just thought that it was supposed to be like a haunting element, like somebody was following me, especially because, like I said, when I first played the game and I saw a figure, I at first thought, because I hadn't seen anything up to that point, so I was like, oh, like, is this all leading to somebody waiting for me? Like, am I meeting somebody? And when it disappeared, I'm like, okay, did I just did I just see something and it wasn't correct?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and when I saw it again this past time, then I was like, okay, something's going on. But I don't think I saw them enough to form a real opinion, to be honest, because it all happened so infrequently. And once I did realize it, I was more like kind of shaken a little the one time because
yeah,
so weird.
It is pretty creepy.
Yeah. It's one of those like 4th or 5th playthrough things where it like starts to sink in, where you're like, they're everywhere.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any in the caves.
Oh.
They're only outside.
But the caves are... That's when you descend into his mind,
The caves
though,
are their
well.
own thing.
I mean, okay, let's talk about then, because that's a good segue to like the grief as an affection of the mind. So there's a comment that he makes when he's talking about the island itself, where he describes the cliffs have a white chalk beneath them, and when someone on the island is dying, they'll carve horizontal lines into the cliff to signal to the mainland that someone's dying, and the mainland will leave them alone for a period of time, whether it's an infection or it's just like to leave the dead to grieve. The idea being, when you carve those lines in, whoever's on the island right now is going to be left alone for a period of time. And then when the sea has eroded those lines back into the cliff face, then someone can go to the island again. So there's sort of this timeline put on the island where it's like, it is ancient, it has been there for a long time. Whether the island is a metaphor for grief or whatever you might take it as, that literal statement as a mechanic of a world, I think kind of speaks to that, where, you know, it takes an age for these kind of infections to wear off, and to go away. And like, he's this kind of, you know, his wife has died, he can't really get over it, and he sort of goes into the bowels of his mind and goes into the bowels of this addiction with the, you know, the alcohol and the, you know, he hurts his leg because he's drunk coming down the hill, and he chugs the diazepam and the painkillers, and he goes into the caves. So I guess like the caves themselves, which is just a real weird trippy sequence. What do you guys take from that, or what do you think of the caves in general, given that kind of framing device of, before you get into them, he's like, when you're dying, you carve the white lines into the cliffs. When you come out of the caves, the white lines are in the cliffs, but you never carve them yourself. For
me, the caves come back to the biblical reference. Sort of at the very start of the game, the light of the beacon is very obviously framed as like the goal.
He even comments on it.
Yeah, there's a few narration bits of like, I'm going to the beacon. So you're like, all right, that's where we're going. And pretty much up until the point where you go into the caves, that, you know, they put it in a place. Pretty sure it physically would have to like move to different locations.
It does,
yeah. But they always make it visible. Going into the caves, sort of like this idea of blindness from the light, if you would say. The metaphor kind of breaks down when you then leave the caves.
I know.
It's, you know, quote unquote, regain your sight, but
doesn't.
Yeah, I sort of see that. Yeah, the caves for me is always that idea of like, it's based on that like biblical reference of Paul going to Damascus. It's it's sort of like that representation of like not really knowing where you're going, but just kind of like just going, just walking
ahead.
for. Yeah, just moving and going where you believe you have to go, and eventually making it to the Damascus place.
Well, he gets there and he realizes that it's not what it was all cracked up to be. In the game, I don't mean the actual Bible verse, but like there's an element to it where I guess, I don't know, the parallel of the infection doesn't quite gel with the metaphor of the road to Damascus, because he's blinded on the road to Damascus because of his lack of faith.
Yeah.
Are we then to believe that in the game, is his lack of faith in his ability to get back to Esther? Like, is it him trying to convince himself to, you know, pass through the grief or commit suicide, whatever your reading is on the ending? Like, it just doesn't, there's something about it, there's some misalignment of the allegory and the execution that I can never quite pass, where it just doesn't quite sit for me.
Honestly, like, my more shallow takeaway from the cave was just, this is probably the first game that I honestly felt like I would love to have a VR headset just to walk through them.
Oh my god.
Because I literally felt like I was in a ride simulator from like Disney World or something. Like,
it's crazy, right?
Yeah. It reminded, there's a ride at Disney, it's one of those, that stupid Avatar area in Florida, and it's like a boat ride, a dark ride, and it has like kind of these bright blue neon colors, and like, you know, those sort of mushrooms you see along the floor.
Or like the bioluminescence.
Yeah. Yes, that's what it looked like, that ride that I'd just been on like a year ago. And so I'm going through this and I'm like, it felt very almost nostalgic in a way that I know the game wasn't going for, but that was totally what I was feeling as I was going through. Like, I would love to put on a VR headset with this.
I wonder if it has VR support. There's probably a way to get it.
Someone's modded that if it doesn't. Yeah, that's such a fascinating thought. Honestly, I think that would be like even more depressing.
Probably.
Like, so
the ending would be terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying.
Yeah, honestly.
Depressing.
Yeah.
All the stuff you look
I'm just
for.
thinking about like the flying.
Yeah, the
yeah,
jumping.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like Pinchbeck Scripts, leans into that a lot. Like that idea of like, I mean, the caves in particular are like such a highlight of his interest in this symbolism, this metaphor, this kind of semiotic language. That I think his idea was you bury the player in so much metaphor and symbolism that they just have to take what they can from it. Like they'll just pick and choose and be like, I'll take this, I'll take that, I'll take that. The problem is if you read the script as a whole, it doesn't work. So I've read the literal script for this. I have a lot of free time these days, guys. Read the whole script, played it a few times, and went, okay, I can kind of see how it works, because you don't get all of it. But I think when you have all of it, it just kind of, it's so symbolism heavy. Like, when you read, like Lovecraft is kind of mentioned at the start, but like, how like everything with him is like language. It's like the kind of, everything has to be over described, and you can't just say something's red, it has to be sanguine. Like it's that kind of writing.
It's all a bit racist.
And this isn't racist, but just a little xenophobic. But like the melting of reality, metaphor, flesh, mind, physical, and emblematic are well written, but I think in my opinion struggle to find purchase sometimes. But I guess for me, if we're talking about a takeaway from this game, yeah, there's not a lot going on gameplay-wise, but what they've tapped into is an atmosphere and a tone and a deliberateness. There is a sharp focus in this game, like the lilting music, the piano, the narration, the way the narration is delivered. The narrator in this game deserves a fucking raise, because there is a moment when you walk past the words Damascus on the rock and he starts to just rant at you.
Yeah.
And it's some powerful stuff. Like, it's like some good voice acting. And I think if we're talking about, what games should aspire to be, or what makes a game good, or what makes a game meaningful, that deliberateness is the key thing. It's not written by a committee. It's written by one dude, it's produced by one guy, and it's made by 4 people. I think the deliberateness of this game, much like Firewatch, is why I think it has value. I have a quote from Stephen King that I kind of like to end on, because I think it speaks to this kind of quiet, kind of death of humanity, this kind of weird, solipsistic, kind of guttural, silent oblivion thing this game is going for, whether you like it or not, and whether you want to think about it or not, I don't know. But it's from Wolves of Kala, and it's a quote, "Do we say the world will end in fire or ice, Gunslinger?" Roland considered this. "Neither," he said at last. "I think in darkness." End quote. Do you have any recommendations for this week?
Oh gosh, I don't know, but I feel like after playing this, we should play the Stanley Parable.
Yes, I've never played it.
Me neither.
The Stanley Parable came out after this, and a lot of people lauded it as like, oh, it's like Dear Esther but better.
Interesting.
Even though it's Dear Esther but just different, and it's a very different game. But it kind of, it came out before Firewatch, after Dear Esther, and it was sort of lauded as like the game with the best writing. It won a few awards. It's a good one.
Okay.
And it kind of follows this line of like, what do we do with the games
now? What
do we do about the video games?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Danielle, what about you? Do you have any recommendations?
It's funny. I was really thinking about this last night, trying to figure out like what would I recommend. I don't know, because I've definitely read like it came across as like a novelistic like type of game, and so I know I've read novels kind of like this, so like this is like a very abstract recommendation, but it's like kind of an out of order example of storytelling, but
Please,
much more definite.
No.
It's out there. The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, by Muriel Spark. Have you ever heard of that?
No,
we just died internally because we thought you were going to say House of Leaves.
Oh my gosh! Okay,
that's a good recommendation.
Well, look,
we just
you were leading us down
face,
the House of Leaves.
That was like a garden path. The look on Ben's face was like, "Is she going to say it?"
Look,
like, oh my god!
I've never read House of Leaves yet. No,
that's
probably way better. That's probably way better.
Sorry.
Like,
sorry. What was the one you were going to recommend? Sorry,
I was just going to say The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, just because it like kind of it it does linear storytelling, but it kind of like picks and chooses different scenes to tell it. It's much less abstract, but that was the only thing I could think of, honestly, other than maybe We the Animals, whose author I forget, but it's made into a film, which I haven't seen yet. And that was kind of out of order, but kind of the similar storytelling where like it's very abstract a lot of times and you don't know what's going on. But again, yeah, I had a hard time. Or okay, one more, I promise. Like Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. It's a film, very good, very abstract, but still linear. Still linear.
It's hard, isn't it?
House of Leaves.
Look, mine this week. I've been replaying Bloodborne. I have a clinical problem with the Soulsborne franchise. I'm replaying that again. I've been watching Star Trek Discovery at a friend's recommendation.
Jeez.
It's really fucking good, guys. I was because I'm a big Star Trek fan. I was rewatching Next Gen, and a friend of mine from work was like, "You got to peep the new one." I was like, "I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if I fuck with new Star Trek. It's so good." So highly recommend. Otherwise, I just finished the third and final book in the latest Edge Chronicle series. It's the last one ever. I can't think what it's like the Descenders. It's not great, but check it out. It's like the final one of the series. Like, I don't know. It's a milestone. It's a series that's gone on since like 2002.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I've been reading Rowan of Rin for a video we have coming up, which we can't talk about.
My lord, Rowan of Rin, what a flashback.
Yes, I've been reading that. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on. Otherwise, Ben, where can people find us?
Facebook.
At Dcm.Works Social.
Think about it. YouTube.
YouTube.com/DCM.Works.
Twitter.
At DCM_Works.
Patreon.
Patreon.com/DCM.Works. You can head there to support us. You get access to post shows when we have the time to do them, as well as exclusive interviews behind the scenes, bunch of additional content. There's like 70 plus hours behind the scenes, and it just helps us pay for what we do. We have a bunch of staff now, so it really does help us out. Danielle, if people wanted to find you on the internet, support your work, obviously levelstory.net, was there anywhere else you wanted to point them to?
Is it okay if I mention my Patreon?
Yeah, plug everything.
So I do have a Patreon page for Level Story, and that is patreon.com/levelstory. So if you want to go support that, you can. But I'm also on social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram under the handle Level Story Mag, or on Tumblr and Twitch under just Level Story.
Excellent. Anything else? So I guess check out the latest issue of Level Story Magazine.
Yeah, definitely.
Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, I've been enjoying it. It's kind of done my head in learning about the fan base and how they react to stuff. So I'm sort of thoroughly enjoying that one.
You should play the game, honestly. I mean, I'll always recommend it, even though like it can be crazy, but I'd always recommend it. It's one of my favorite games.
It's got a very, very good intro.
Yeah, okay.
It's very fun.
Is it on the PlayStation 4?
You can get all the video. You can get all of them on the PS4.
Okay,
yeah.
There's like a collection.
That's all I play on these days. If it's not on the Switch or the Nintendo, the PlayStation 4,
you can borrow it off me.
Okay,
I have a copy
there you
of
go.
it.
All right,
Thank you, Ben.
I promise.
No excuse.
I'll do it for you, Danielle. I'm sure we'll have you on again before long for some other game with a convoluted narrative. But thanks for taking the time and joining us. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah. Trying to think if we have any. So the big first video project is out. About my first book.
Oh yeah, that one.
You can go check that out. And also, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you can actually buy the poster. I think when this goes live, of that book cover, if you wanted to for some reason. Crystal's art is so good. I don't know why you wouldn't want to. And you can hang it on a wall. No one knows what it has to mean, so you can go check that out. Otherwise, if you subscribe to our top tier, you can actually get the book itself. But I'll put a post up for that later. Otherwise, if you want to follow us individually, I'm at DCM Hey Pie.
I'm at Literal Citrus.
Danielle, do you have a handle?
Oh, I'm at wait, hang on. Sorry. Because it's kind of confusing. There's an underscore. It's this underscore is Danielle.
Excellent. Otherwise, we'll see you guys.
Yep.
You were going to do a thing. Ben,
No.
No? Okay, we'll see you guys next week.